Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Oh, this is not a news flash. It's reality, but in our lives, things come up and you have to move forward. Sometimes it could be somewhat challenging. Finding the opportunity in those challenges is what we're going to focus on today. And there's been a lot of changes in our world, even in the past few months. Sometimes, there's some uncertainty in our future. She is somebody that helps people with a lot in terms of definition and communication. And she is a storytelling coach, a screenwriting coach. This is in her wheelhouse. A lot of what we're talking about comes from experience in her world, even personally. And she's back with us. It is Michelle Cutler on the program. How you doing today?
I'm really well, Steve. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here again.
It's good to have you here. And this, looking for the opportunity, is what reframed my life, because a few years ago, even, I would look at change and be like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do with that? That ended. Now what? Now I look at it as, instead of freak mode, all right, now there's an opportunity there. It took a lot of rewiring in my mind to look at it that way. But I do. I feel that that's part of what we're talking about today. Are you feeling the same?
Yeah, totally. I think the word rewiring is really great, what you just said, in that, we move along in sort of patterns. And sometimes they're comfortable patterns.
Yep.
And sometimes they're patterns that perhaps aren't so great, but we become comfortable in them. And sometimes comfort is more, pleasing than challenge or choice. But when the rug's pulled out from you, let's say in a job or a career track or a relationship, a health situation, even, a change in your mobility status, like so many things can really, I'm calling it pull the rug out, but, sometimes that's for fun, but that's not really fun.
No, but I get it.
But clear. So there is this opportunity. I mean, it feels like a death. It feels like everything you may have, been investing in a career track or a relationship, was supposed to go a certain way with certain guarantees, but we just don't live in that kind of world anymore.
Yep.
And if we ever did, I think there was certain illusions we could kind of peg ourselves to, but we're really in sort of the, cold water splash right now. And I'm working with a few clients through that, what I'm calling like pivoting. It could be midlife, it could be mid-career, but it's this idea of pivoting, to really make change have a good an outcome, an outcome that maybe you didn't even imagine was possible.
Do you feel that many of us don't see the outcome because we're so stuck in maybe the shock of it, the fear of what's next, that we can't see? I don't want to say the forest through the trees, but it's kind of that way where you're in the middle of the forest, but you can't see the prosperous, beautiful field in front of you because you jumped down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I think also, any kind of rejection or unplanned change, it's you take it personally.
Yes.
I mean, even if it's like company wide, even if they're just cutting, 20,000 jobs from your 100, or no, I shouldn't say, like 80 jobs from 150, let's say. If you're one of those 80, it feels personal, even though there's 79 other people, feeling the same way. So, how do you kind of quickly, in-game adjustments, they call it in sports, or you could even call that in gambling or, game theory, where you have an in-game adjustment that the strategy you had is suddenly irrelevant. And so you have to quickly come up with a new strategy. And again, it's actually a great moment to have like aspiration. It's a great moment to have ambition, because in a way, all bets are off, right? So if all bets are off, why can't you make the most of that moment to sort of undefine yourself? I told you, I think last week we were talking about AI or autocorrect or something, and I had accidentally sent a message to a managing director of a production company, just catching up, and I had said something about how I had taken a break from the commercial work I was doing to upskill. I meant to say upskill, and I wrote upskill, right? But the autocorrect turned it into unskill. And even though and we had a laugh about it, but in a way, like I did unskill myself to make space for new skills. Like the skills that were no longer serving me, I just had to let them go,
Mm.
and then redefine what, like, I was saying to one of my clients who's just, basically lost their job, but they are able to apply for reemployment in the same company, but in a different, a company-wide position. I said, look at the job descriptions of a position that you would have wanted 5 years from now. When you're on a certain career track, you can't make it go faster in a lot of fields. So if all of a sudden, again, all bets are off, can you define yourself for who you would have wanted to be in 3 or 5 years? Because you might actually be ready for that. You might be ready for that, but the train is off the tracks. So, go for it. But you have to take a minute to accept that that's possible.
Do you feel when these changes come up, it's almost as if the dry erase board, we're cleaning everything off that was on there, and now it's the opportunity for new stuff, and look at it as a potential fresh start instead of, and I know easier said than done, there's a lot at stake here, supporting families and all of that, but freaking out isn't going to get you anywhere. That's what I learned, like personally learned. It doesn't, it's you, instead of taking that time, and maybe you need a little bit of time just to process a job change or whatever. Then it's time to look at it in a different way. And I think you're right. It's almost, remember back in the day when GPS first started, it wasn't on our phones. It was a little device you would put in your car. And as you'd be driving, it would be recalculate. Yeah. That's the way I look at it. You need to recalculate your direction in these situations.
Yes, that's a great, great, great analogy for sure. And I agree with you. You do need to give yourself, you have to take a little time, to mourn and to grieve and to deal with loss. Like you have to process it. But I would say, and maybe this sounds a little bit coachy, but process quickly because things are moving just very, very fast. And in my own experience in the past and like sort of observations I've made, the longer you're unemployed, the more unemployable you become. So unemployed doesn't have to necessarily mean I have a job. Like it could be that there are just no jobs right now in whatever your field is. And you could say the same thing, the longer you're out of a relationship, the harder it is to kind of be back in one because you get comfortable, eating your cereal in bed or whatever it is that you do, but if you long for the relationship, relationships come in many shapes and sizes, as does, being quote employed. Employed means engaged. So being engaged in, if it's community service or if it's like tutoring or if it's helping people in some way, they call literary citizenship or favors, being involved in things just keeps you sharper, keeps you ready. You meet more people, you find more opportunities. You may learn something you didn't know that then inspires you for a new direction or enhances the direction you've already been in. And same, so again, like taking a moment to mourn, but not becoming so withdrawn that the act of re-engagement feels like Mount Rushmore. The act of re-engagement should never leave you if you can manage it, and there are people that can help, like I can help. Sometimes it's just a matter of looking at the vocabulary words you use to describe yourself. So one of the clients I'm working with, she's been 15 years at this company and has to redefine herself in 25 words. Like, what are her skills in 25 words? after 15 years of service and with the hopes to be reemployed, further up in the company. What are 25 words? That's a tall order for a short amount of words.
I want to look at this a little bit deeper. Now, 25 words. Do you feel, now Michelle, I'm going crazy over here. I'm just throwing this up in the air right now. Do you feel that we should do that no matter what? A synopsis of who we are, what we offer, maybe our purpose, and write it down. We don't do that. We just take it for granted. Like, John Smith, I am an accountant. I help people figure out their finances in their business. This is what I do. Well, no, maybe there's more to it than that, but you don't realize it because you're on the autopilot. You're just going through your day every day. Well, let's say you work for a company and that changes, especially in our current climate, of what's going on. Now you may find yourself unemployed and kind of lost in terms of what you do, who you are, what your purpose is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting because perhaps that's sort of the business approach to the more new agey type of thing that says like, write your intention, for the day, or, they're different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that personally. It's interesting if I think about it. When I take my morning walk, I tend to I'm walking the dog and I'm thinking in my mind kind of like, what is my intention for the day? Or I think my partner, I think he quotes Ben Franklin, but I could be wrong when he says, what good can I do today? Right. And like when you wake up in the morning, it's not a bad approach to the day, right? What good can I do? That's a great approach, actually. I should do it more. And then this idea, like you're saying, to check in with yourself. It doesn't have to be daily, but every so often when you're feeling a slog, in what you're doing, a slog in your routine or a slog in anything you're doing, your workout, a slog in your diet, a slog in your energy, your sleep, take that as an opportunity. It's a message. It's a message, and receive it and respect it, right? And take that opportunity, especially when you're not under the gun, take that opportunity to define yourself. And it may change, and you don't have to be stuck to some plan. But it's keeping your muscles flexed, your brain sharp. So yeah, I think you have a great idea there.
Funny you should say writing those things down, the what would make today great and all of that. I do that. I have a gratitude journal, but it also has other fields. So it's almost as you get a notebook and write things down, but it makes it easy because it holds your hand. And it's 3 things you're grateful for. What are your strengths? What I am this. So I am creative. I am resilient. And there's another 3 fields. What would make today great? And then later in the evening, if you want to follow up, what would have made today better? What was your act of kindness? What did you do? I don't get a chance to fill out all the fields, but kind of the same way where it's staring you in the face. But I think that many of us, and by the way, I want to go back to what you said a second ago. The job loyalty is gone. It's been gone for decades. Like where, maybe our parents would go to work and it'd be like, 20 years and you got to watch it. It's going to keep going and everything's great. And no, tomorrow you could be gone. It's just the reality of life.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of a shame in a way. But it's just where we are. I mean, I was talking to someone also. It kind of comes down to this idea as well as brand loyalty, where so many businesses get bought up and folded into, and then what you thought. I guess it's funny. I can't remember if I told you about this about the dishwasher. It's ridiculous, but we had our dishwasher broke right before we were having like a bunch of people come to visit, like 6, it'd be 8 of us, and the dishwasher broke right before they arrived. Mm. And we waited, here we are hand washing everything again. It was fine. It was became like a group activity. After our friends left, we went to go buy a new dishwasher, and we told the guy the brand that we had. And he said, we said, it's a 20-year-old dishwasher. Like this dishwasher worked for 20 years. And he said, oh, that brand was the best brand 20 years ago. Now it's been bought up by two or three other companies. It's just that it's not as good. So it's just not going to be as good as what you want. And so we bought a different brand. And I'll tell you what, it's a bit ragged. Like it's a really beautiful looking dishwasher. It's digital and does all these things, but the racks are kind of raggedy, right? They're just kind of cheap. It feels cheap to me. And I thought, okay, this is where it comes down to we've lost that connection between some kind of loyalty to services or loyalty to products. That I remember the shock of learning what planned obsolescence was, which we're talking definitely 30 plus years ago, that devices, things are made to break. Like they're designed to not last.
Yes.
So, right. So, because then you need to buy more. Apparently, Instant Pot, which was this great, I don't know if they still exist, but it was this great invention of this like slow cooking hot pot, which we have. Apparently, they made the product so well that they went out of business because no one needed a new one. Now, I could be wrong.
Well, no,
you're wrong, but you get the idea, right?
This was an advertising camp. And before I even go here, you're 100% right. Everything that we buy today, it's disposable. You used to have somebody come and fix it. You used to bring somewhere. Remember the vacuum cleaner? You get a vacuum cleaner. There was the repair guy around the corner. You take it there. But what you're referring to reminds me of, and this was an ad campaign, very effective. I want to say back in the 70s, 80s, the Maytag repairman. And he would be sitting there just doing nothing, just waiting for the phone to ring. It never would, because the campaign was they built them so they're so good that you never need to get them fixed.
Right.
Not like that today, unfortunately.
No, but that's what you're saying. I think there's a generational, loss. We've in one generation we've lost that accountability, right? And what are we doing now? I'm going to sound really like all over the place, but what does it result in? A lot of waste, just a lot of waste, a lot of things being thrown out, being quote recycled, if that actually happens. Lots of cars. They have like miles and miles and miles of secondhand cars and rental cars that just sit there, and yet we are still producing more cars. Okay, so we're talking about products, but at the same time, you can look at institutions the same way, that we believed in would be, a certain way. I would say my student loan institution has like changed 3 or 4 times.
Yes. Oh, same thing with banks.
Over the course of the loan, right? And I feel like I'm sitting here thinking like, at this point, you all should just give me a reprieve because I have helped you to get to this point, But so moving back, sort of looking back to this idea of a professional reboot or, a pivot.
Yep.
Or, in a way, how do you like sort of sprinkle fertilizer over your skills, but like how can your skills seem more robust and abundant than you're even aware of? And it's usually because we fall into sort of routines and habits that kind of diminish our abilities. And it's not that we're not capable, it's that we just sort of forgot. I know that I've always, majority of my life, I've been a freelancer or self-employed entrepreneur, that type of person, right? I have spent some years working in offices, so I have an experience doing that in production companies and talent agencies. And one thing I know is that I don't need 8 hours to get the work done. Like I don't need to sit for 8 hours a day to get the work done because it's really only about 2.5 hours worth of work. I personally prefer to do that in my own time, in my own way, and I still get it done. Some people prefer to sit in the office with that, stability and comfortability, knowing that it's there every day. Not everybody can go off and be self-employed or freelancer. They don't have the stomach for it. Some people don't have the stomach. So when you're sitting in the office day after day and you just get sort of used to your routine, you forget how good you are at what you do, how good you might be if you had half the time to do it, So like all of these changes we've had moving from the office to working remote, like suddenly all these people are, during 2021, 22 are working from home. And like this idea of how do you self-regulate your work habits, is challenging. But at the same time, you start to see what you're good at and then how quickly you can do things. And if you're going to do this sort of reboot of yourself, these are things to look at, like where you can position yourself in whatever the field is or the climate, whatever it is that you're doing. It's an opportunity to move forward,
I love
when you may not have thought you could.
What you're saying here is, I think, true whether you're employed doing fantastic or you're looking for, your next stop in life, wherever it may be. We don't take the stock in ourselves. We don't see the opportunities. We don't see what we have going on there. And I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but I think in music, and there was a song that popped in my head about a week or so ago, and it won't leave my mind. And if I said this before, please stop me. But the song came out in the mid-90s. Dave Matthews Band, Ants Marching. The song is about what you're talking about, where we do the same thing every day, like the ants, robotic. Mm-hmm. And there's one line in the song that says, take these chances, place them in a box until a quieter time. Lights down, you up and die. So I look at that, I'm like, what does this mean? And I look deeper into it. It means take chances. Don't say, well, we don't want to get some time. I'm going to put it in a box until later, and then I'll deal with that because I'm busy right now. I got things going on. No, if you're thinking it, take those chances in life because you might not be able to just because the way life is. And I think kind of what we're saying here. It's like, take a chance. Look at life. Look at what you have. Take stock in it. But we wait until we're pushed to do something like that, like i.e., losing a job, as you described about a client.
Yeah, and also, it's funny. As you're saying that, I'm also thinking in terms of like relationships, because I also have someone. This is not an official client. It's someone I know well, mm-hmm. a friend who I'm trying to help because he was dumped. He was dumped in a very unceremonious way.
Yeah.
And he is thinking like, how do I, go out and meet people? Like this idea of how do you meet somebody, especially if you're 35, 40, 45, 50, like moving up. How do you meet people? And so I said to him, oh, I would love to put your Hinge. I would love to do your Hinge.
You know what? Honestly, I didn't even consider that's another aspect of communication that you can help people with.
Well, because I was thinking like, I can see all the value. I'm like, dude, you are such a great person. And I can see this and I'm not even trying to get with you. Like, I just value you. Clearly, this other person clearly didn't. Let's not define you by that. Let's define you by the value, all this sort of love and value that I see in you. Let me write it for you, and he's going to let me do it. So I'm curious. It's kind of a bit of an experiment to see, sometimes the people who love us, they're the people to listen to. We will reflect back to you everything that we love, I have one friend who had a similar situation with a breakup, and I was trying to reflect that back to her, like her value and her love, the love back to her, like beauty, all of these things. And she just didn't want to listen to me. Didn't really got caught up in the rejection.
Yeah.
And got kind of stuck there.
We're out of time, but
sorry.
I want to share with you. I was in that situation. Didn't see it coming. This is so unlike me. But back when this happened, I said, no, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not going to accept this. And I started dating right away after, 20-year relationship. I am so glad I did, because now people say to me, you know what? At your age, people don't meet, and I don't mean just dating people, just in general, people don't meet new people at your age that I've done, that I've met people because like I said, I'm not going to accept this. So that, I rarely, Michelle, pat myself on the back. I'm going to pat myself on the back for that one. So for anybody, dealing, and I think you carved out a new niche, writing for dating apps and profiles.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be, because you know what? Whatever it takes to get unstuck, let's do it.
Yes, absolutely. Best way to find you. How do we do it?
Yeah, on my website, it's www.michellecutler.com, which is MICHELLECUTLER.com. Then I have my socials and everything. You can find them there. And I would say if you want to send up like the email that people can send it to you for like instant feedback, if people have questions or thoughts about anything we've talked about for our next week, because I feel like while we were sort of, I don't want to say all over the place, but we were covering a lot of things. Hopefully, if anyone's out there and really feels like something was starting to address something they're thinking about and wants to pose a question for us, we'd love to hit it next week. 100%
instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. And yeah, we went a different direction today, but kind of universal in terms of taking stock in ourselves, seeing the opportunity and believing we got a lot to offer, despite when we're dealt with those challenges in life. Michelle, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Always fun to talk to you.
Same. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her.
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge.
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend.
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.